You know, in between two major military campaigns, something really different was happening. A foundation was being laid. And no, this wasn't about conquering new lands. It was all about building character. Today, we're going to explore how a series of incredibly powerful events in early Islamic history really defined the whole essence of integrity and leadership for centuries to come.
So picture this. It's the 9th year after the Hijrah. The entire society, in a way, became a classroom. The core principles of leadership, ethics, and justice, they weren't just being written down in some rule book. Nope, they were being demonstrated through these powerful, real-life events that became permanent lessons for absolutely everyone.
And this all brings us to the big question for this explainer. How do you actually define true leadership? We're going to dive into this by looking at a few key moments in history where the answer became crystal clear. Leadership, it turns out, isn't about raw power. It's about principle.
So let's start with our first case study. It tackles a problem that is, well, timeless for any government, right? How do you stop corruption and make sure that the people in public office have absolute integrity? Imagine the scene for a second. Zakat collectors are being sent out to collect charity. You see coins being carefully weighed, you see grain and livestock passing from hand to hand, but then one collector comes back and presents the public funds, and also a separate little pouch. He says, okay, this is for all of you, and this part was given to me as a gift.
Well, the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, addressed this immediately. He didn't wait. He got up on the pulpit and asked this incredibly powerful rhetorical question. The message? It was unmistakable. A gift that you get because of your job title isn't a personal gift at all. It belongs to the public. He drew this bright, clear line right in the sand between what's yours and what belongs to the public trust.
And this is where the crucial concept of ghul, which is basically corruption, was firmly established. The Prophet warned that any official who takes anything beyond their salary, even something as small as a single camel or a sheep, will literally carry it on their neck on the day of resurrection, where it will cry out against them. Just think about that. It's a profound lesson that your accountability to God is always, always higher than any public office you might hold.
Okay, so integrity in public finance was set. But what about integrity within the chain of command? Our next story explores that really critical tension between following orders and, following your conscience. Where exactly is that line?
So an expeditionary unit is sent out, and it's led by a commander named Abdullah ibn Hudafa. The Prophet appointed him and, as was standard, told the men to obey their commander. Everything seemed totally normal.
But somewhere along the journey, the commander gets really, really angry with his men. And in his rage, he tells them to gather a huge pile of firewood and light a massive fire. You can just picture it, this giant, crackling bonfire in the middle of the desert at night, with sparks shooting up into the starry sky. The soldiers, probably pretty confused, do as he says.
And then he gives the unthinkable order. Enter the fire. The soldiers are just stunned. They're looking at each other, completely baffled. The whole reason they embraced Islam was to save themselves from the fire of the hereafter. How on earth could they now be ordered to walk right into a literal one?
And you know what? They refused. Eventually, their commander's anger cooled down. When the whole story got back to the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, he laid down this foundational principle of Islamic ethics. He told them that if they had entered that fire, they would have stayed in it until the day of resurrection. The lesson was clear. Blind obedience is forbidden. Your conscience, guided by your faith, has to reject any command that is unlawful or immoral. Period.
All right, so let's zoom out a bit. How were these principles applied on a much wider scale? This wasn't just about individual ethics anymore. This was about purifying the entire land from these deep-rooted remnants of idolatry. The goal wasn't just conquest, it was clarification.
This verse from the Quran just perfectly frames the whole purpose behind the military units that were sent out during this time. The mission was simple: remove the physical symbols of polytheism so that the truth of monotheism could be established clearly and without confusion.
So you had these missions dispatched to dismantle key centers of idol worship. Great companions like Ali ibn Abi Talib were sent to take care of al-Fuls, while another, Jarir ibn Abdullah, was tasked with the temple down in Yemen known as Dhul Halasa, which was sometimes even called the Kaaba of Yemen.
Now here's what's so amazing about this. It's the personal touch. Jarir, the guy sent to Dhul Halasa, he actually admitted to the Prophet, "I'm not a very good rider, I keep falling off my horse." So the prophet struck him on the chest, prayed for him, and Jarir later said he never fell off a horse again. And when the mission was successful, the prophet invoked blessings 5 times for the men and for their horses. It just shows you that leadership wasn't just about barking orders, it was about genuine care and making sure your people had exactly what they needed to succeed.
Okay, let's get to our final case study. This one, I think, reveals the most intimate aspect of leadership, a person's character. And we see this unfold through the incredible story of Adee ibn Haatim. He was a tribal chief and a Christian who came to meet the prophet.
Now, Adee was expecting to meet a king, a powerful monarch with all the fancy trappings of royalty. But what he found was something else entirely. On the way to the prophet's home, they were stopped by an old, weak woman. And the prophet stood there with her patiently for a long time, just listening to what she needed. Then, when they finally got inside, the prophet gave Adee the only cushion in the house, one made of leather stuffed with palm fibers, and he himself sat on the bare ground. It was in that moment that Adee said to himself, "By Allah, this is not the way of a king."
The prophet then addressed the real reason Adee was hesitant to accept Islam. He thought the Muslims were poor and weak. So he gave him 3 prophecies. The first, a time would come when a lone woman could travel on her camel all the way from Al-Hira in Iraq to the Kaaba in Mecca, fearing no one but God. Absolute safety would just prevail.
The second prophecy was even more unbelievable. He said that the treasures of Kisra ibn Hormuz, the mighty emperor of the Persian Empire, would be conquered by the Muslims. Adee was just floored. Kisra, the great emperor? It seemed absolutely impossible. And for the third prophecy, he said that a time would come when wealth would be so widespread that a person would literally walk around with their charity, trying to find someone to give it to, and would find no one who needed it. And the amazing thing is, Adee ibn Haatim lived long enough to see the first 2 of those prophecies come true with his own eyes. So when you put it all together, from the corrupt collector to the commander's fire to that incredible meeting with Adee, what's the common thread here? What do all these stories tell us about the kind of legacy that was being built? It really gets down to the absolute core of it all, right here in this verse. The foundation of this new type of leadership wasn't power, it was mercy. The goal wasn't building an empire, it was building a just society, founded on compassion, integrity, and service to others.
You see, these teachings on public trust, on conscience over blind loyalty, on purification over conquest, and on humility over arrogance, they weren't just rules for that specific time. They form the timeless bedrock of what ethical governance and a just society should look like. And these principles are still profoundly relevant for all of us today.
And that really leaves us with a final question to think about. When we look back and measure any leader's legacy, what truly matters in the end? The territory they conquered, or the principles of integrity they left behind? Thanks for joining me on this one.